The night Marcus decided to test the woman he loved, he told himself it was the only way. He had been down that road before, the one where love felt real until the money stopped. His first relationship ended the week after he lost his job at 26. His second ended 3 months after his business partner stole everything from the firm they'd built together. Both times, the woman had given him a reasonable explanation. Both times, he had believed her. Both times, he had been wrong. So when he met Serena, and when things between them began to feel different, genuinely different, the kind of different he had stopped letting himself believe in, the fear came back. Quiet at first, just a whisper in the back of his mind, when she smiled at him across a restaurant table, or when she fell asleep on his shoulder during a movie. But does she love you, or does she love this? Marcus was 34 years old. He owned a logistics company in Houston that moved freight across 7 states. He drove a car that cost more than most people's homes. He lived in a house in River Oaks that had 5 bedrooms, a pool, and a garden his housekeeper tended twice a week. He had never once posted any of it on social media. He didn't believe in that kind of showing off. But people knew. People in their circle knew exactly who Marcus Owens was and what he was worth. Serena had come into his life through his cousin Jerome's birthday party 8 months ago. She was 29, a registered nurse who worked long shifts at Houston Methodist. She had shown up in scrubs because she'd come straight from work, her hair pulled back, no makeup, apologizing to Jerome for being late. Marcus had watched her walk in and something in him had gone very still. They talked for 3 hours that night, not about money or business or any of the things people usually wanted to talk to him about. They talked about a documentary she'd seen about migratory birds. They talked about the way Jerome used to get into trouble as a kid. They talked about her grandmother in Baton Rouge, who made the best bread pudding in Louisiana and refused to write down the recipe for anyone. He asked for her number before the night was over. For 8 months, he had taken things slowly. He brought her flowers on ordinary Tuesdays. He drove 40 minutes to her apartment just to drop off soup when she mentioned she wasn't feeling well. He met her friends, sat through their gentle interrogation, answered their questions without flinching. He watched the way she treated waitstaff at restaurants, the way she spoke to elderly patients when she didn't know he was listening outside the hospital corridor, the way she handled herself when things went wrong and no one was watching. Everything he saw made him want to trust her, and that was exactly the problem, because the more he wanted to trust her, the louder the fear got. One evening, sitting alone in his office after everyone else had gone home, Marcus made a decision. He was going to find out, once and for all, whether Serena loved him or loved what he had. He would step back from everything, the house, the car, the lifestyle, and show her a version of himself that had lost it all, not forever, just long enough to see what she did. He called his cousin Jerome that night. "You want to do what?" Jerome said. "I need to borrow your apartment for a few weeks," Marcus said. "The one in Gulfton." There was a long pause. "Marcus, that place is 480 square feet. I know what it is. Your shower rod is made of Italian marble loom." Another pause. "Does she know what you're worth?" "She knows I own a company. She doesn't know the numbers." "Okay," Jerome said slowly. "And you're going to tell her what, exactly?" Marcus had already worked it out. He would tell Serena that his company was facing serious financial trouble, a contract dispute with a major client that had frozen a significant portion of their cash flow. He would tell her the bank had called in a loan, that he'd had to let go of staff, that he'd moved into a cheaper place temporarily to cut costs, that he was working as a driver for a delivery service on the side to keep things going. None of it was entirely impossible. Things like that did happen to businesses. He wasn't asking her to believe something that couldn't exist. He was just arranging the truth into a shape she hadn't seen before. Jerome agreed reluctantly and spent the next weekend pretending not to feel personally offended as Marcus moved a few bags of his things into the apartment. The following Monday morning, Marcus called Serena. "Hey," he said, "I need to talk to you about something. Can you come over tonight?" She could hear something in his voice. She said yes immediately. When she arrived at Jerome's apartment building, a beige complex off Hillcroft, with a parking lot full of old cars, and a leaning mailbox nobody had straightened in years. She looked at the address on her phone, then looked at the building, then looked at her phone again. Marcus met her at the door in a plain t-shirt and jeans, no watch, no anything. He told her everything, or rather he told her the story he had prepared. He kept his voice steady and his eyes on hers, and he watched her face as he spoke. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look around the apartment with that particular kind of scanning look people give a room when they're calculating. She just listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you okay? Not how bad is it? Not what does this mean for us? Not do you have enough to get through this? Are you okay?" Something moved in his chest that he didn't want to name yet. "I'm managing," he said. She nodded slowly. "Do you need anything right now? Tonight, I mean. Have you eaten?" He hadn't, actually. He'd been too wound up. She went to the small kitchen, opened the refrigerator, which held almost nothing, and without a word pulled out her phone and ordered food to be delivered. She sat with him on the second-hand couch. Jerome had hauled in from a neighbor's garage, and they ate takeout from paper bags. And she told him about a difficult shift she'd had that week, a patient she'd been worried about, a small good thing that had happened near the end of the day. She talked about ordinary things, and he understood that she was doing it on purpose, making the space feel normal, taking the weight of his story and carrying part of it without being asked. She didn't leave until nearly midnight. At the door, she hugged him for a long time, long enough that he had to remind himself to breathe. "Call me tomorrow," she said, "even if it's just to say hello." He watched her walk to her car. He stood in the doorway of that small, borrowed apartment, and he felt like the worst kind of fool, not because he had tested her, because he was beginning to understand that he might not need to. But he kept going. The next 2 weeks were not easy, not for Marcus, and not, though he tried not to think about it, for Serena. She showed up on a Wednesday evening with grocery bags, real groceries. She said she wanted to cook dinner because she had a day off and didn't feel like being alone. She made jambalaya on that small apartment stove, and it filled the whole place with a smell that felt completely out of proportion to the space. She made enough for 2 days. She put the leftovers in containers she'd brought from home, labeled them, stacked them in the refrigerator. She didn't ask how the business was going unless he brought it up. When he did, she listened without offering solutions he hadn't asked for. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't pull away from it. She just stayed near it, the way you stay near someone in a hospital waiting room. Not because you can change anything, but because leaving would be wrong. One night, she mentioned casually that she had picked up an extra shift that month. Marcus asked why. She shrugged. "Just wanted a little extra in case you needed anything and were too proud to ask." He stared at her. "I'm not offering money," she added quickly. "I know you wouldn't want that. I just wanted to have it, just in case." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Serena." "Don't," she said, and her voice was gentle. "You don't have to say anything." He almost ended it there, almost told her the truth right then, on Jerome's lumpy second-hand couch, with her sitting cross-legged beside him in her socks. But he didn't, because there was one more thing he needed to know. He had heard something through a mutual friend the previous week. There was a man named Derek in Serena's circle, someone she'd briefly dated 2 years before Marcus, who had recently started reaching out to her. This wasn't part of Marcus's original plan, but when he found out about it, he understood that it was perhaps the real test. Not whether she'd stay when he had less, but whether she'd stay when someone with more came knocking. He mentioned Derek casually one evening. "Jerome was telling me he ran into your friend Derek at some event last weekend." Serena looked up from her phone. "Oh yeah, I heard he was back in town. He reach out to you?" "A beat. He texted a couple weeks ago. Just a land?" She set down her phone and looked at him directly, and I didn't respond. "Because I'm with you. And because Derek knows exactly why things ended between us, and a text saying hello isn't something I owe a reply to." She held his gaze the whole time she said it. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Is that all you're going to say?" she asked. "What do you want me to say?" She thought about it. "I want you to believe me." "I do," he said, and he meant it. He meant it completely, and that terrified him, and he still sat there on that couch and said nothing else, because the truth he had been holding for 3 weeks was now pressing against the inside of his ribs, and he didn't know how to let it out without breaking something. He called Jerome that night after Serena left. "I need to tell her," Marcus said. Jerome was quiet for a second. "Yeah," he said. "You do," he told her on a Saturday. He asked her to come over in the afternoon, and when she arrived she could tell something was different. He was standing in the middle of the apartment when she walked in, not sitting, not doing anything. Just standing there like a man waiting for something to land on him. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." She crossed her arms slowly, not defensive, bracing. He told her the truth, all of it. The company, the house in River Oaks, the car, the fact that Jerome's apartment was not where he actually lived. He told her about the fear he carried, about the 2 women who had left him, about the decision he'd made that night alone in his office. He told her everything he had constructed and why, and he stood there and let her hear it in one long, unbroken piece. When he finished, the apartment was so quiet he could hear the traffic outside on Hillcroft. Serena uncrossed her arms. She looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked at him, and when she did, he saw something in her expression that he hadn't been prepared for. She wasn't sad, she wasn't relieved, she was angry. Not the loud kind, not the kind that comes in with raised voices and slammed doors. The quiet kind, which is always worse. The kind that comes from somewhere real. "I picked up extra shifts," she said. "I sat in this apartment 3 nights a week, eating takeout on that couch because I didn't want you to feel alone in something hard. I told my mother you were going through a difficult time, and she prayed for you. She actually prayed for you, Marcus. By name." He said nothing. "And the whole time," Serena continued, "you were watching me, like I was something you were studying, like I had to earn the right to be trusted." Her voice didn't shake, which made it worse. "I understand why you have that fear," she said. "I do. I'm not standing here telling you your past didn't hurt you. But you should have talked to me about it. You should have told me you were scared and let me decide whether I was someone worth being scared around. You didn't give me that chance. You just decided you were going to run an experiment on me and see what happened." Marcus had prepared for a lot of things. He had not prepared for how completely right she was. "You're right," he said. He didn't try to follow it with anything. She looked at him for a long moment. "I need to go home," she said. "I need to think." She picked up her bag and walked out. He stood in the middle of Jerome's apartment and listened to her footsteps go down the hall, listened to the elevator, listened to nothing. That night and the night after, he didn't call her. He had decided that if he owed her anything after what he'd done, it was space. He owed her the chance to think without him hovering at the edge of it. On the 3rd day, Jerome showed up at the door unannounced with 2 coffees and an expression that meant he already knew something. "She called me," Jerome said. Marcus looked at him. "She wanted to know if the fear you described was real," Jerome said. "About the other women. About what happened to you. What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. That it was real, that I watched it happen to you, and that it made you different after. I told her you were an idiot for handling it this way, but that the fear underneath it was real." He handed Marcus one of the coffees. "She asked me if I thought you were worth it." Marcus didn't ask what Jerome had said. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. Jerome sat down on the couch. "She's not gone, Marcus, but she's not coming back to you until you figure out how to ask for something without running a test to see if the answer will hurt you." Marcus sat with that for a long time after Jerome left. He wrote her a letter, an actual letter, on paper, because a text felt like the wrong vessel for what he needed to say. He didn't ask her to forgive him. He didn't try to explain himself into innocence. He told her that what she had said in that apartment was the truest thing anyone had said to him in years, that he understood, finally, what the fear had cost him. Not just in the past, but now, with her, in the specific and irreplaceable loss of 3 weeks, he had spent watching someone reel from behind glass. He left the letter in her mailbox on a Tuesday evening without texting her that it was there. She called him on Thursday morning. He answered before it finished the first ring. "I read your letter," she said. "Okay," he said, a beat of quiet. Then she said, "You wrote that you were afraid I would leave if you were less. But Marcus, I showed up to a 480 square foot apartment in Gulfton with groceries, and I cooked jambalaya on a stove that had one working burner. What else did I have to do? Something in his throat closed. I know, he said. I know, I'm sorry. She was quiet again for a moment. I'm not going to pretend this was nothing. What you did was wrong, and I need you to know that I know that, and I need you to know it too. I know it, he said. But, she said, and there was something shifting in her voice now. Something that was not quite softness, but was close to it. I also know that people who have been hurt do stupid things to protect themselves. And I'm not going to throw away what we have because you were stupid. A pause. I'm going to be very annoyed about it for a while, though. He almost laughed. It came out wrong, half a laugh and half something else entirely. That's fair, he said. I want to meet your actual house, she said. The real one. When I'm ready, whenever you say, and I want you to talk to someone, she said. A professional. About the fear. About what the other women did to you, and why you've been carrying it around like it applies to everyone. He hadn't expected that. He was quiet for a second. Okay, he said. I mean it, Marcus. I know you do. I said okay. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for a while. Okay, she echoed. They stayed on the phone for a long time after that, not saying much, just existing in the same line of silence. Outside Marcus's window, his real window, in his real house, where he had gone back to sleeping, the morning was gray and slow, and Houston was waking up the way it always did, loud and unhurried, full of people trying to figure out how to be honest with each other before they ran out of time. 6 months later, Marcus got down on one knee in Serena's grandmother's kitchen in Baton Rouge on a Sunday afternoon that smelled like bread pudding and good coffee, with Mama Claire watching from the doorway in her good house slippers, and Jerome standing in the corner, pretending he wasn't crying. Serena said yes before he finished the question. And when she pulled him up off his knee and looked at him, really looked at him, the way she had looked at him in that borrowed apartment all those weeks ago, when she asked if he was okay before she asked anything else, Marcus understood, finally and completely, what it meant to be known by someone who chose to stay anyway.